Hi, in this video we're going to continue talking about the imaginary unit I. This is part 2. So recall that I is equal to the square of negative 1 and that I squared equals to negative 1. So let's go ahead and find some square root of negative numbers. In this case we have the square root of negative 32. So the thing is that you're trying to break it down into two numbers where you know the square root of one of them. But also, you want to make sure that you pick the highest number you can think of that you know the square root of. Okay? So what I mean by that is like, let's say for example you pick 4 and 8. That will give us 32. We know the square root of 4, but the square root of 8, we still have to break it down, so that will be more work. In case, instead, if we use 2 and 16, we know the square root of 16, and the square root of 2 is already as lowest terms. So let's go ahead and use 2 and 16. Okay? So we have the square root of negative 32 is equal to the square root of 16 times the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 2. 16 times negative 1 is negative 16. Negative 16 times 2 is negative 32. Okay. Now, the square root of 16 is 4. The square root of negative 1 is I. And the square root of 2, we're going to leave it as the square root of 2. That's all we can do. And you have the answer of 4i square root of 2. Okay? So notice I could put the I at the end, or I can put the I in the front. It just looks nicer that way. Okay? Next one. About the square of negative 75. Well, in this case, we have the square root of negative 75. Okay? And I'm going to break it down into the square root of 25 times the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 3. Why? Because 25 times 1 is negative 25. Negative 25 times 3 is negative 75. And this is the biggest number that we can do the square root of. Okay? So in this case, we have 5. This is I. And then we have the square root of 3. Okay? Now, what about if you're like, oh, I was thinking about 15 and 5. That also gives us 75, which you're correct. But we don't know the square root of 15, and we don't know the square root of 5. That's why 25 and 3 is the best choice. Or in this case, it's the way to go. Okay? A ver, go for it. Your turn. Go ahead and do the square root of negative 20. Pause the video. Welcome back. Okay, let's see how you did. So hopefully you have the square root of negative 20. And this guy is equal to the square root of 4 times the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 5. And we have the square root of 4 is 2. The square of negative the square of negative 1 is I. And then we have the square root of 5. So the square of negative 20 is equal to 2i times the square root of 5. Okay, remember to click the like button.